In this video, I want to share with you the process that I'm going to take to apply this waveform style design right here. I want to start off by listing the gear that I'm going to be using. I will be leaving my Amazon affiliate and other affiliate links for you in the description below in case you want to check out the gear featured in this video. To start off, I'm going to be doing this tattoo on a piece of Reelskin fake skin. This is going to be spirit stencil paper right here. For this specific style and this specific sizing, as you can see, it's roughly around the size of my finger, which isn't too big, and the style isn't necessarily shading dominant or line dominant. I would say it's more of an organic design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an approach where I gradually build up to the final results here. I'm going to use a Rhein 003 round liner. I'm also going to be using the MusoToku Mercury M-1 tattoo machine to apply this entire tattoo. For the ink, I am going to be using dynamic black tattooing ink with simple petroleum jelly to keep my fake skin clean. I'm also using phantom tattooing gloves. I will also be using simple Scotch shop wipes to keep my fake skin clean. That is everything that I'm going to be using. Once again, my affiliate links will be for you in the description below. Now, as I mentioned, this is going to be more of a waveform design. So waveforms typically don't have any solid starting or ending points in my opinion. It's more of an organic textural design that makes up the one waveform here. So for that, I decided to go with a smaller line weight, such as this 3-round liner. It is going to be in the 00 size 3-round liner. And I'm also going to run at a lower voltage. The Mercury M1, this one's going to be, I believe, a 4.3 stroke. So I am using a bit harder of a hit. However, you can use like a 3.5 if you'd like, a 3, and you should be able to get the same results, or if not similar. Where I'm going to start is I'm going to get some ointment, and then I'm going to essentially place it down on the area that I'm going to be working first, and then I'm going to kind of gradually work my way. Now, since I am right-handed and my right hand's falling on this side of the design, I'm going to start with ointment over here, and I'm going to start working this side of the design over here, so that way I don't have my hand over this part of the stencil going back and forth, and then I'm going to lose all of this. So I'm going to approach it like that. I would recommend approaching it in a similar manner. Whatever side you're close to, I would recommend having that be the side where you start first. So from here, I'm going to make sure that I get ink. I always want to make sure that I have adequate ink flow each and every time before I commit to any sort of deposit. So from here, I'm going to identify my A and B point, and then from there, I'm going to use a series of organic motions. So first, I'm going to start right here, and I'm essentially going to use a very light line. I'm not really applying any pressure at all. I'm going to start with a line there, and then basically I'm going to work from this area on over to the right. So I start with a simple line. Allow me to wipe away so you can kind of see what I'm actually working with there. I'm running at 5 volts even as well. And then from here, I'm going to use a series of back and forth motions like this with a taper in and out, kind of like a pendulum motion. So that way I can kind of mimic the audio data information here. Because when I look at a waveform, that's essentially how I interpret it. So you can see as these areas get longer, so do my lines, and you can see that I'm using taper in and outs at the end of each line that I'm creating, so that way I get a sort of sharp point. I'm not going to go with the approach where I outline it and then fill it in. I don't think that's going to look well or read well when we're done, so therefore I'm going to be using a series of back and forth motions like so to accomplish the waveforms that I am looking for. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and wipe away. And then I'm going to continue. Now, I'm not really applying pressure. Like when I'm touching down, I'm not rushing the needle into the skin like that. What I am doing is I am essentially using back and forth motions like that, and then I'll essentially go over a spot a couple of times, and then the more I do that, the more saturation will be applied. I'm essentially going to kind of repeat that throughout. So here is another point where I have the longest point right here. Here I have another long point. So basically I'm identifying where the longest areas are at. I'm kind of making the structure of the waveform. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use those back and forth motions going in straight lines as I possibly can. I don't want to have them crooked or anything, so I want to use very straight, consistent motions with a taper out on each end. Just like so. I'm going to go ahead and put some ointment and wipe away, and that is what I have there. Now, I like this reed much more than the reed where I would outline and then kind of, you know, fill it in. I don't think that that's going to be a good approach, especially for this sort of design. So you can kind of see if I continue, and since it is more of an organic design, it's not gonna be perfect. We don't want it to be perfect. It's okay if there's little like white patches in between, as audio data is kind of sparse and sporadic, and it's based on the sound that's recorded. So every waveform is going to be different, is what I am saying. So there's no reason to necessarily be perfect, which makes this design really fun to do. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe away, but you still want your textures to show up. So that's really the important takeaway here, is when we're doing this, we want our waveforms to come through and show like textures. We don't want them to kind of be outlined and then filled in. We want to have a textural approach the entire way through, just to confirm. So it's going to be the same thing. Make sure you have adequate ink flow. And then I'm going to go back, put some more ointment, dab away any excess. So for me, what I like to do is I kind of like to identify my longest point, which is going to be right around here. And that's essentially the line that's required to apply this area. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Tapering in and out. I'm going to give, oops, the skin came up there. I'm going to give my needle enough time to work here. Okay, great. And essentially at each one of these points, I can kind of do that all the way down. And then from here though, what I'm going to do is, since I want to stay consistent throughout the entire duration of this tattoo and organize, I'm going to go ahead and just apply this area right here using these back and forth motions. And any areas that don't have as much texture as you'd like, feel free to go back and then add your whip shades, add, you know, more saturation if you need it. There's no way to know what you're gonna like until you kind of go through the motions and see the results that you're capable of getting. So I'm gonna go back over here as well. I'm gonna use a series of back and forth motions. So moving on over here, it really doesn't take me many passes to apply this. I kind of look at it. I think I get more picky with how the textures read. So then I'll go back and then kind of focus on that a little bit more. As you can see, so I'm basically adding a little bit more, I guess, audio data that's a bit more defined here. That's essentially the point of these lines here. And keep in mind, these aren't in the design themselves. However, I'm adding them because that's going to be my personal taste. That's how I interpret this audio file, or this waveform, forgive me, not audio file. So I'm going to do the same thing. Taper in and out right here. There we go. Going back and forth. I'm not going for saturation. I'm not even using a lot of pressure. I'm letting the needle and my speed work in unison to kind of give me the results I desire. Same thing. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here, moving on over. with a tapering in and out, marking and establishing the next point. And then I just simply go and I begin to apply those areas. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and wipe away. I'm constantly wiping away so that I can see kind of what's going on, what I am working with. If there's any areas that I would want to kind of add to, I'm going to do so. Then you can kind of see I'm just adding a little bit more tone right here. And texture right there with the little pendulum back and forth motions. Just brushing those textures on top of the top layer of the fake skin there. And then I'm going to repeat that process moving on over here to this part, and then we're going to kind of keep doing this until the tattoo has been completed. So I'm going to go back for some more ink. I think that's one of the most important things. You always want to make sure that you have adequate ink flow, because if not, no matter how proper your technique is, you're not going to get good results. So taper out right here, taper in and out on each edge right here. And then while we do that, each line created after is going to get repeated with a taper in and out. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and dab away, put some ointment on, and then I'm going to wipe away and see the results that I got. And then proceed over here. So taper out, bring it around. Back and forth motions, and I'm making sure, like, one of my main focus points is going to be, as I'm creating these back and forth motions, I'm making sure that they are parallel. I'm not doing them sideways or this way. I'm making sure that each line that I'm creating in each whip motion is neighboring the one that I just did. I want the lines parallel to one another, so that way when we start texturizing the ends and then bringing them closer together, it starts resembling that sort of waveform, and that's exactly the goal. So I'm very mindful of that. As I am establishing the boundaries, I want to make sure that I'm using consistent motions that do relate what I'm trying to accomplish here, which is waveform with textured look. So right here, the same thing. You can see I do taper in and out right here, like a little combination of both. And then you can see I'm just going to do some tapers in and out. Same thing right here. I have a little bit of open area, so I'm going to use pendulum motions to deposit ink in these areas right here. And I do feel like if our technique is correct, we can definitely go back over with no issues. I'm going to go ahead and wipe away, see the results, and continue. So we're about halfway through. I'm going to continue with the rest of the design in the same manner, as I do like the results that we're getting here. So more ink. I need adequate ink flow. It's really important. It's just as important as proper technique. And then I'm going to move on over here, and then we're going to do the same thing, where I do some taper outs, ends right here, to establish these points. And if I really wanted, I could establish all the main points first if I'd like. For example, what that means is I can come back over here and then kind of do the same thing where I establish the main points like so, and then I just go back and connect them all. This may be a good way to go, especially if you're more prone to losing your stencils for whatever reason. Then kind of establishing a map of the waveform is definitely not a bad way to go. I feel like that's also acceptable. That's one way that you can go about it. It really comes down to your choice and what you feel comfortable with. I encourage you to kind of zone in on what feels natural and comfortable and embrace that as the artist for you on your end. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to come back this way though. And you can see I'm not doing fast motions. I'm letting my needle work because I'm running at a lower voltage. I'm running at a lower voltage that my needle doesn't do as many rounds per second. I have a little bit more time to work on the skin and I don't feel rushed. So I get more time while minimizing mistakes just by simply lowering my voltage, which is why I'm running at 5 volts. Same thing over here. And again, I'm trying to use that parallel approach where each line is parallel to the next, or each marking rather, because they're not lines, they're more markings than anything. I'm going to go back for some more ink, wipe away with some ointment to see where we are at. The same thing right here, just back and forth motions, and you're going to notice that each pendulum motion that we make is pretty much neighboring one another in terms of speed, sound, which means that the depth is going to be the same as well. So each one that's deposited is neighboring one another. I'm going to go back for some more ink here. I'm going to go ahead and wipe away, and that's what I have there. So I'm just going to continue with the remaining part. If there's any pieces that I need to touch up along the way, I will go ahead and do so. So that's why I like wiping away after every time I deposit to kind of see the new results that I am working with. If there's anything at all that needs to be touched up, if I feel like some areas are too light for my liking, you can see I'm just going to simply go back and repeat the process until we have accomplished the results that we were looking for. It's exactly how I'm going to repeat or do that and go about that. Now I'm going to repeat the rest over here. So from here, I'm going to go back for some more ink. And then I'm going to get this point going. Do the same thing right here. And I think what's also cool about this design is that you don't have to necessarily follow the exact waveform. Like there's so much room for interpretation and for artistic expression with these with this specific style. It's really hard to go wrong. I think the only way that we're going to really apply a tattoo like this wrong is if we leave too much open gaps, or if we kind of outline it first and then fill it in. I think both are kind of equal in terms of poor results and a poor read. Same thing right here. I'm going to go ahead and dab away. And then I'm going to go back for some more ink. And then apply these areas using a series of back and forth motions like so. Wipe away, I need to see what's going on right there. And then I'm going to fill in this area right here. So I'm choosing to stay to the integrity of this design just to kind of get my points across and encourage you to follow the stencil, especially if you're just starting out. However, if you're at a point where you're more comfortable with applying stencils while incorporating your own artistic approach, I encourage you to kind of, mix match or make long what you see is short. You get the idea. And I'm going to go ahead and continue with some more ink here. I need to get more ink to finish this last area. And then I'm going to taper out right here, taper up. I feel like the ends are really important. I think what's really important about this style design is the hand speed, the voltage, and your start and end points. So like, let's say if I was just creating lines and not really, because I'm more focused on my tapers than I am the actual lining, like the actual right here, this part in the middle. I'm more focused on these parts out here and keeping my hands straight going back and forth than I am focusing on depositing saturation, because the saturation will come with the correct hand speed to voltage. However, if I'm not capturing those textured ends on each side, it's important that I'm not going to yield the results that I want as the artist. So therefore, that's why my main focus is going to be these ends right here and making sure that they read like tapers and not like a line, a bulbed end. I need them to be sharp, pointy, and I need them to taper out, because that's the look that I am going for. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and dab this up, put a generous amount of ointment to see exactly what we are working with. And that's looking great. Just going to do a little bit right here. Still, and even though I'm applying over saturation already, I'm still going to keep my same flow. Just because it's saturated, I'm not going to start cross-hatching and doing all of this. I'm going to keep the same workflow here of back and forth motions, because that's the only way that I'm going to capture this sort of wave form. It's important that I do not speed up, and it's important that I don't start cross-hatching, because I want the stencil to have a textured read and I want it to be organic. So now that we've done most of it, it's just this little part, which we're going to do the exact same way, and then we can close out this tattoo. Are you wanting to develop your tattooing skill sets? Now you can practice and develop anytime, any place with an assortment of tattooing workbooks that I've created. With these assorted tattooing workbooks, we can practice our basic lining all the way to advanced lining. We can practice shading, shading placement, dot work, textures, and more. All we are going to need is a tattoo workbook of mine. We can use a pencil, pen. We can even use a tattoo machine with a ballpoint cartridge to develop our tattooing abilities further. That means that we don't need tattoo ink, we don't need napkins or petroleum jelly to get to practicing. Simply open one of my tattooing workbooks and get going. It really is that easy. You can get your hands on one of my developmental tattooing assorted workbooks by simply clicking the links in my description or in the pinned comment section below, or navigating on over to Amazon.com, typing in Daniel Yuck, and you'll see all of the assorted tattoo workbooks that I've created come up. If you have an Amazon account, be sure to follow my Amazon author page as well, as I would greatly appreciate your support. Should you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section down below. I will do my best to assist you in the best possible direction. With that being said, let's get right back into this video. So I'm going to go back for some more ink, make sure I have adequate ink flow. And then from here, I'm going to taper out right here, bring it around and taper up. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Back and forth. And I really go out of my way to make sure that each time I'm depositing the ink, I'm not speeding up. Even though I'm close to the end as well, I'm making sure that I just don't start speeding up because I'm close to the end. I want the entire tattoo to read cleanly. In order for that to happen, I have to remain patient and paceful. Wipe away, see the results. Fantastic. And then from here, what I'm going to do is go back for some more ink, and then I can kind of finish out this little last area. And if there's any other areas that I feel like I can go over, I'm going to go ahead and do so. You can kind of see I'm adding my own preference right there. Right here. And then right here, I'm going to start with the same thing, but starting with small back and forth motions. And then bringing them to the size of this waveform end. And then from here, I'm going to go back for some more ink, dab away, put a generous amount of ointment, wipe away, and then we're going to see what we are working with, and then we're going to go ahead and make any last minute adjustments that we would need before we call this tattoo complete. So it's looking fantastic. So from here, all I'm going to do is just some last touch-ups over the thing, over the entire waveform here, so that way I can kind of even everything out and smooth it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here. And then I'm going to focus more so on the inside right here than I am going to focus on the textures. And I'm still going to keep the same hand speed to voltage. I'm still going to keep the same depth, and I'm still going to keep the same technique where I'm using back and forth motions. The only thing that I'm doing different now is focusing on the inside right here. And you can see that I'm using back and forth pendulum motions. I'm going to go back for a little bit more ink here. I am using just the very tip of my needle. This entire tattoo, I worked off just the very tip of the needle. I'm not driving any force. You can hear I'm running at a very low voltage. And you can also hear that my touch is really, really light. It's almost brush light, as I am using brush-like motions to deposit this ink here. So I'm going to go back for some more ink here, dab away, and I'm going to wipe away with a generous amount of ointment, and I'm going to repeat that across, and I feel like that would be my last layer here. But you're going to notice that even though this may be my last layer, I'm still not going to rush anything, as each marking here that I'm creating is very intentional and serves a purpose. So with that logic, with each marking serving a purpose, I'm going to make sure that I do my best to apply these as cleanly as I can. Kind of spit up a little bit there, but not too bad. And the purpose of this is to apply a little bit more saturation to complete the audio gaps here, to make it kind of more one cohesive waveform, and apply a little bit more saturation. Now, what's cool about these last layers, once we have like the main structure established, we don't have to be exact or precise with the coming layers. If we need to move a little bit faster on the final layers, we can actually do so, as it's not going to impact the read, meaning if I want to kind of speed it up like this, I can do that. But for this specific layer, it requires me to move at this pace for the level of saturation and texture that I'm going for. But let's say if I was going to go over it again for whatever reason, then that's when I can kind of use a faster motion, as I'm not trying to get as much saturation as I am right now. I'm going to get a generous amount of ointment, place it on there so I can actually see the true results here and what we are working with. And that's looking fantastic in my opinion. So I'm going to use my eyes at this point. If there's any final like things that I need to do, any things that I don't like at all, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Other than that, I feel like this one is a session, this one is a completed session. We are now officially done. Allow me to give you another view of it so that we could take a look at it. So here we are at a top view, and these are the final results. This is what I am working with. Now, although it's not by any means perfect, however, if I were to see this and someone was wearing this tattoo, I would instantly know what it is, because I am a music head. I personally listen to a lot of music, and I create music. So therefore, when I see an audio or a waveform, I know exactly what that is. I used to even create audio software, so I used to deal a lot with audio files. And in my experience, this is what an audio file, or this is what a waveform looks like right here. I'm very happy with these results. It definitely does read like a waveform. That's going to be 110% subjective. I felt like approaching it like this with a series of dashes rather than outlining it would prove better results. And in my artistic opinion, I do feel like this is a better read than outlining and then packing in. Let me know what you think down below. But that will be it for this follow along here. I do hope that you could take something from this video and apply it to your end. If you have any questions at all, I encourage you to drop a comment down below. I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. If you found this video helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as I will be bringing more videos like this for you. With that being said, I appreciate you, your time, and your support. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.